He was the greatest demon lord in history, but when he reincarnates into the future after 500 years, he finds that everyone is now stronger than him. The story begins in the world of Alniath, where there's a war between the humans and the immortals, and the fate of the world depends on the fight between the strongest of the two sides, the human hero Graham and the demon lord Veltol. It would usually be a useless fight since Veltol is immortal, but thanks to Graham's holy sword, he manages to deliver a blow that's strong enough to overcome Veltol's regeneration. Veltol praises him, wondering how he lost to a mortal, even though he's stronger than him in every way. Graham notes that Veltol thinks mortals are weak since they will all die, but he believes it's the thing that makes them strong. Veltol refuses to believe such a stupid thing led to his defeat, but Graham mentions it's the reason he won, even if he doesn't believe it. As his body turns to dust, Veltol promises to return, but Graham notes he will fight him again if that happens. In the present, Veltol awakens from his slumber, and a girl named Machina welcomes him back, revealing she has been waiting for him for 500 years. She apologizes for how she's dressed, but he tells her he doesn't mind, glad that she was able to perform his reincarnation ritual. He decides they should conquer Alniath once again, but she mentions the world he once ruled is long gone. She notes that 80 years ago, Alniath and Earth were caught in a catastrophe, which caused the two worlds to fuse. 90% of all people were wiped out, and the national governments stopped working, so cities started functioning as independent states, which led to a number of wars between them. But things are now relatively peaceful, and she mentions that Earth was advanced in technology, and after being combined with the magic from Alniath, it led to even greater advancement. She shows him the current state of the world, and he can't believe how far the mortals have come. A man almost bumps into him, but Machina pushes him out of the way. He can't believe the man so easily bumped into her, one of the 6 dark peers, so he decides to teach the mortals to fear them once more. He fires his magic into the sky, and it blows a hole in the clouds above, but the people just think he's an idiot using weather magic. An alarm goes off, and Machina reveals it's forbidden to use magic within the city, so she takes him and runs away. She notes that after his death, they agreed to a ceasefire with the humans, but after the fusing of the two worlds, the citizens of the Immortal Kingdom had to scatter across the world. After that, the major industries started hunting them, because the world collectively decided that immortals didn't deserve human rights, and they were treated like vile creatures. As the humans continued to become more advanced, they developed anti-immortal weapons, which almost wiped them all out. Veltol asks her what happened to the other 5 dark peers, so she notes that 3 of them went missing, and one of them, named Zenel, sacrificed himself so she could escape, because she was one of the only 2 people who knew how to revive him. Veltol realizes she hasn't mentioned Marcus, which startles her, and she tries changing the topic, asking him if he's thirsty. She tells him to stay put while she goes to buy him a drink, and as he waits, he notices lights floating around the area. They seem to be drawn to a girl, and she suddenly makes certain videos appear on all the screens in the city. She seems pleased with herself, and as she leaves, Veltol confronts her. He knows she was the one who changed all the screens, and she acts like she doesn't know what he's talking about, but he mentions he saw the fluctuations in the ether around her before all the screens changed. She's surprised he could tell that she was the one who did that by just looking at the ether, so she wonders who he is, but she doesn't believe him when he tells her he's the demon lord. Veltol doesn't understand how she was able to change the screens, but he feels she's a genius, which makes her blush, so she notes she just hacked the screens. Veltol mentions he's looking for Marcus, asking if she knows of him, so she points him towards a huge building, saying Marcus is the CEO of the company. So he goes to the building, and as he talks to the receptionist, Marcus's private secretary Kinohara mentions they've been waiting for him. As they ride the elevator, Kinohara sees him staring at her, so he notes he was just interested in the creature she has on her shirt, so she mentions it's the mascot of the Ishimara magic industry called Ishimari, and they plan to create a movement around him in the future. They arrive at the top of the building, where Marcus greets Veltol, but he thinks it's disrespectful for Marcus to stay seated in his presence. Marcus asks Veltol why he came to meet him, but Veltol notes he should be celebrating his return before asking questions. He tells Marcus to help him rebuild the Immortal Kingdom so he can once again rule the world, but Marcus starts to laugh, saying he's not going to help him. Veltol prepares to teach him a lesson, but Kinohara suddenly tries to slice him, so he jumps back to dodge it. Marcus tells her to stand down, and he notes Veltol has become weak, because in his prime, he wouldn't have needed to dodge the attack, so he isn't going to bow his head to him. He tells Veltol to leave, and he notes that if he begs, he might consider helping, which makes Veltol angry, so he prepares to teach him a lesson, but Marcus cancels his spell before he can do anything, which shocks him. Marcus starts to laugh, thinking Veltol must be wondering why a person like him, who can use magic without chanting, has been made powerless by someone without talent, so he reveals a device on his neck, saying it's the reason he has become stronger than him. Veltol has no clue what it is, so Marcus pulls up a video of him explaining the device. We learn the device is called a Familia, and Marcus mentions there are 5 steps for activating magic, but with a Familia, 3 of the steps are removed, allowing people from all races to use magic. Marcus notes that he made the Familia so it can't be used by higher beings like Veltol, or else he would lose his advantage. Veltol tries to attack again, but Marcus breaks his spell once more, noting that even though Veltol's magic casting speed is fast, the Familia is still faster, so without one, he'll always be too slow, because everyone has one implanted in their body. Veltol doesn't understand why Marcus is against him, so he says he has always hated him, because he was better than him at everything. Marcus summons a number of blood swords, shooting them at Veltol, and as he falls out of the window, Marcus thinks he's dead, so he plans to be the next demon lord. We see Veltol manage to survive, but he notes that his regeneration isn't what it used to be. He accidentally runs into a group of men, so he gets thrown in the garbage, and after Machina finds him, she apologizes for not telling him about Marcus's betrayal, but he notes that even if she had told him, he would have still gone to meet him. She takes him to her apartment building, and he's impressed thinking she has the whole building, but when she takes him to her tiny apartment, he thinks she's joking, but she notes it's all she can afford. He realizes she's been living like this while waiting for the last 500 years, so he hugs her and thanks her for her loyalty. We go back centuries to when Machina was about to be killed by her own people, because they think she's the reason for every bad thing that happened to them after finding out she's immortal. They throw stones at her, and as they push her into the volcano, Veltol suddenly saves her. He finds her beautiful, and he doesn't think she should die such a worthless death, so he tells her to come with him. In the present, Machina wakes Veltol for breakfast, and he's surprised by how delicious it is, which makes her happy. He asks her if she knows where the other immortals are, so she notes that a few of them managed to survive like her, but they have recently been going missing. She mentions she has lost contact with her close friends, and he wonders if the immortal hunting is still happening, but she notes that the hunts ended several decades ago. She mentions she went to her friend's room after they went missing, where she saw there was a struggle, and she found a note mentioning the immortal furnace. Veltol accidentally spills the tea, and he mentions he's still recovering from his injuries since his regeneration has slowed down. He knows he doesn't have his full power, since he couldn't use his magic to its full potential, and Machina notes that it's because the faith that served as a source of his power has greatly declined in the modern age. He knows that without others recognizing and turning their emotions towards him, his power of faith is lost, but he isn't worried since his life is eternal, and he simply needs to reclaim the faith. Machina suggests they go shopping, and she takes him to a market, where he's surprised because the shop seems empty, but she tells him to step on the 3D scanner, which will help them choose the best clothes for him. She feels bad since she can't afford the expensive things, but he notes his personality is such that even ordinary clothes will look good on him. She asks him if he has any preference in style, but he leaves it up to her, and she tells her Familia to select the best option. It suggests a tracksuit, which he finds perfect, and he notices a design on the back, so he wonders what it means, and Machina tells him it's written in an old language, and it means the Demon Lord. As they leave the shop, Veltol stops her since they didn't pay for the clothes, but she tells him the payment was deducted automatically, which surprises him. He becomes curious about her Familia, so she reveals that apart from its use in magic, it also helps in communication, shopping, and even gathering information. She mentions that unlike smartphones which have gone extinct, Familia are more convenient since they don't need to be held physically. He starts touching her neck as he looks at it, and as she enjoys herself, she gets a notification that her heart rate is elevated, but she just ignores it. He wonders if it bothers her since it's attached to the nape of her neck, but she says she has grown used to it. She mentions how it has become an important part of them, but it doesn't necessarily improve one's life. Veltol thinks he should get a job, but Machina stops him, saying she can pick up more shifts to improve their living conditions. But he declines her offer because times have changed, so he can't stay idle while she works to provide them with all the necessities. He tells her he hasn't given up the idea of conquering the world, and Machina swears to serve him for as long as she lives. As Veltol is about to leave, she tries to join him, but he stops her, since she has her own work, and in the unlikely scenario he can't get a job, they'll both be depending on her income. So she agrees to let him go, but she gives him a device which he can use for payment and to contact her in case of an emergency. As he looks at the device, he wonders what type of job he can get, but his stomach suddenly growls, and he notes it's the first time he has ever felt hungry, so the decline in his faith must be severe. He realizes he can't be choosy, and shouts that he needs a job since he's broke, saying he's willing to do anything. But a man stops him and tells him to visit the commercial guild if he needs work. He asks Veltol if he has a citizen ID, but he's clueless, so the man thinks he must be an illegal immigrant. He says that this is his turf, so Veltol apologizes and leaves, but the man hands him an application form and tells him to take it to the commercial guild. He can't guarantee it will help him get a job, but he thinks it's better than nothing. He guides Veltol toward the guild's location and warns him to stay away from any company under the Ishimaru group, because they have a reputation for exploiting their workers. Veltol soon arrives at the guild, where a clerk interviews him. Since he has no previous work experience, he only mentions his skills related to his role as the Demon Lord, like his experience creating dungeons and leading a nation. But the man tells him there are no positions for him, because they have a policy of only hiring people with the Familia implants. After being rejected, Veltol returns to Machina, and he asks her if she thinks he isn't capable of doing anything in the present era because he's losing his confidence, but she tells him they are just fools that aren't capable of measuring his greatness. He asks her if she knows anyone who can offer them advice, and she says she knows a person, so he's happy that she has a friend. They meet Machina's friend Takahashi, and it turns out to be the girl Veltol met before. She realizes he wasn't lying about being the Demon Lord, because Machina always told her about him, but she never believed her stories. He wonders how they met, so Takahashi mentions they met online, but seeing Machina's reaction, she decides to spare the details. Veltol touches her Familia since he finds it different from Machina's, which surprises her, so Machina explains he used his Sage Eyes ability, which allows him to use the flow of mana to understand the composition of objects that he touches. He mentions he has a general idea of what's going on inside the Familia, but there's still a lot he can't analyze. After that, he asks Takahashi to help him find work, and she wonders if he has any preference, so he notes that he would prefer something that will make his existence known around the world. After considering his abilities and his lack of a Familia, Takahashi suggests he become a streamer, so he wonders what that is. She tells them they broadcast themselves playing games, chatting and even singing, and they earn money from ads and donations. She assures him that it's easy, and she mentions she will even let him borrow her old stuff, but Machina isn't happy about it because she thinks he should find a more stable source of income. Takahashi mentions Veltol has a great voice and a pretty face, so everyone will love him, which even Machina can't deny. Machina is used to living alone in her apartment, so when she accidentally comes out of the shower with nothing on, she gets embarrassed and apologizes to Veltol, but he tells her there's nothing to be ashamed of, and he even praises her physique. Takahashi arrives with the equipment, and as she assembles everything, Machina is worried, but Takahashi tells her to trust in her best friend, because she has already planned everything. She tells Veltol to check out his new setup, and she tries telling him how to use the controller, but he uses his Sage Eyes to learn how it works. He selects a game, and Takahashi worries because it's like Dark Souls, but she thinks it shouldn't be too difficult for him due to his powers, but he dies almost immediately. After losing several times in a row, Takahashi thinks he sucks, but Veltol notes it's fine since he isn't used to playing on the controller. Machina wonders if their plan is falling apart, but Takahashi tells her it's the opposite, since his perfect personality will contrast with his poor gameplay. Takahashi thinks they need to come up with a good intro, because out of the millions of streamers in the world, only a few are making money, so she thinks he needs a unique catchphrase that will leave its mark on people. Makina suggests quoting something from his war declarations, and after seeing it, Takahashi thinks it's alright, and says they can improve it later on. Takahashi tells him to stream every day even if no one is watching. She also tells Makina to stay out of the room while he's streaming so she doesn't get caught on the camera, because they can't have people thinking she's his girlfriend. After that, Veltol streams every day, and his subscribers slowly start growing, but not everyone is a fan of his gameplay. So he gets troll comments, but he isn't affected by them since both positive and negative emotions toward him increases his power, but Makina struggles to tolerate such disrespectful remarks about her master. Veltol eventually reaches 1 million subscribers, so he decides to play a new game, but while he streams, there's someone that spies on Makina. When he finally clears the game, one of his viewers comments on how he was raging, but he notes that if that were the case, the whole world would have ended. After that, he goes out for a walk, and Makina tells him she'll have dinner ready by the time he gets back. As he walks through the streets, he's shocked when he suddenly sees the hero Graham among the homeless people. We go back to before Graham became a hero, and we see him taking care of his sister. He leaves to gather herbs for her, but his father stops him and hands him a sword so he can protect himself. He starts gathering the herbs, but on his way back, he sees an army of dragon folk, knowing they are led by one of Veltol's generals, and he's surprised by why they're all the way out there. But when he gets back to his house, he's horrified to find it burned to the ground along with his entire family, so he swears to get his revenge on Veltol. Back in the present, Veltol takes Graham to a noodle shop and mentions that the food is amazing, but Graham seems uninterested, and simply agrees with whatever he says. Graham mentions it's strange that he's eating with the man who killed his family and allies, and Veltol notes that he feels the same way, because several of his allies were killed by Graham, but he no longer feels hatred towards him. He asks Graham how he's still alive, and Veltol wonders if he has somehow become immortal, which would go against everything he believed in, but Graham mentions that it isn't the case, because after defeating him, the goddess Meldia rewarded him with eternal youth, but he's still a human. Graham tells him that after the war against the immortals, a civil war broke out, and he was ordered to kill those he had sworn to protect, but once peace was restored, he became their next target and he was exiled from his own country. He wonders why Veltol wanted to rule the world, and he reveals it was for peace, which shocks Graham. He notes that almost all immortals were once mortals, and there isn't much difference between them. So as one of the strong, he planned to rise above all of them and rule over the weak to create a peaceful world. Graham disagrees with his idea of peace through domination, and leaves after thanking him for the food, but he's glad they had the chance to talk. As Veltol returns to the apartment, he hears a familiar voice, and notices Takahashi arguing with an ogre in the alley. He prepares to beat her up, but Veltol grabs his arm and stops him, telling the ogre he will give him a chance to leave. But the ogre remembers how he beat Veltol before, so he thinks he's just acting like a hero in front of a girl. He threatens to kill Veltol, and Takahashi tells him to run, but he mentions he wants to test his new powers since he has gathered over 1 million subscribers. The ogre tries to punch him, but he stops it easily with his hand. The ogre counters with a wind blast, which breaks his arm, but he instantly heals it using his magic and flicks the ogre into the trash. Veltol mocks him for being too weak to even serve as a good test, and Takahashi rushes to thank him. He wonders why she was with the ogre, so she mentions he was supposed to be her bodyguard, but he started asking her to double their agreed payment. She notes she has found a better bodyguard, and she offers to pay Veltol for his help. Meanwhile, Marcus asks Kinohara if there's any news of the rats sniffing around the immortal furnace, but she tells him that they have been eliminated, and everything is going as planned. After that, we see Veltol and Takahashi outside a warehouse, where she needs to steal an item, and his job is to ensure her safety. But as she checks her system to confirm the details, he rushes in and breaks the door, stumbling upon a Yakuza operation. He asks Takahashi if the cube on the table is what she's looking for, but she's surprised by how he's communicating with her since he doesn't have a familia. He mentions he reproduced the familia's ether communication using magic, and he notes that there are only a few enemies, so he will just take them out and grab the target. But Takahashi tells him to avoid killing them. He performs his stream introduction, but they don't recognize him and think he's mocking them, so he decides to test his powers on them. They start shooting at him, so he uses his magic to create a barrier around his body, which allows him to easily deflect the bullets. He tells them it's his turn and rushes toward them, knocking them out one by one. As he dashes at the boss, he tries to shoot Veltol, but Takahashi hacks into his familia and overwrites his perception, so he hits his partner instead. Veltol finishes him off with a kick, and Takahashi is impressed by his skills. She prepares to collect the cube, but Veltol senses something and stops her from approaching. Veltol is suddenly attacked, and the enemy seems to be cloaked with invisibility, so Veltol uses the gun to blast the cloak off, revealing a giant mech. Takahashi recognizes it as a 4th generation of Magino gear, which is used by the special forces of the city guard, so she wonders how the Yakuza got it. Takahashi tells him they should leave, since it will be impossible to defeat it, but he thinks it will be a good test. The mech activates its weapon and starts shooting at Veltol, but he dodges it and jumps into the air to fire his magic at it. He manages to land a hit, but he knows it won't be enough to take out the mech, since he isn't at his full power. He realizes he has reached his limit from the faith of 1 million subscribers, but he thinks he can still win, and he takes out his sword. He dashes toward the mech, which also converts its gun into a sword. They block each other's attacks, and Veltol encourages it to show its full power, so it gets serious, and it suddenly cuts off his arm and slices off his head. The pilot reports back to the headquarters that the target has been eliminated, but they're shocked when they see he is still alive. Veltol mentions he's impressed, but tells them they lack battle experience, because they let their guard down just because they cut off his head. He takes out his demonic sword Virmal, and the mech is frozen in fear. Veltol cuts off its arms and legs, saying it was a good fight, but they were unfortunate to be up against the Demon Lord. The pilot reports that he failed to eliminate the target, and he ends his own life to avoid being interrogated. Veltol is surprised at the ability of modern weapons to enhance a person's power to such a level, and he finds the new era terrifying, but Takahashi thinks he's even scarier, since he defeated a Magino gear by himself. She notices the Ishimaru logo on it, and believes that the Yakuza could never get their hands on such tech, so the job might be more dangerous than she anticipated. Veltol wonders what the cube is, so she notes it's a data storage device made from mithril, and she needs to check what's inside it. They open it and find a list of names, which Veltol recognizes as all of his immortal subjects, but Makina's name is luckily not included. Takahashi tries to contact her client Iju for more information, but she's unable to reach him. She tells Veltol they'll need to visit him in person, and he says that since he's the king, it's his responsibility to take care of the immortals. They soon arrive outside a large apartment building, and Takahashi uses her hacking to get past security. They enter the elevator, and Veltol asks her to let him press the buttons since he likes pressing them, which she finds strange, but she notes they can't go directly to the 13th floor, and they must follow a specific sequence of buttons. They eventually reach the 13th floor, but Takahashi stops him from entering, saying there are traps. He uses his powers and notes that all the magical and physical traps are disarmed, so she's surprised, and he explains his duties as the Demon Lord included the construction and maintenance of dungeons, so finding traps is easy for him. They reach outside Iju's apartment, and Takahashi rings the bell, but no one answers. Veltol realizes the door is open, which Takahashi finds strange, because Iju isn't the careless type. They smell something rotten, and Veltol realizes something isn't right, so he thinks they should proceed with caution. Takahashi finds Iju's body, and Veltol recognizes him from when he met him before, even though he looked different. So Takahashi notes he was always disguised as a homeless person whenever he went out to gather information. Veltol analyzes the body, and concludes he was killed a few days ago. Takahashi thinks it must have been his enemies, but Veltol believes it to be the work of a professional. She thinks someone might have hired an assassin, but his familia has also been destroyed, so Takahashi thinks the real goal might have been to destroy the information on his familia. Veltol thinks the only lead they have left is the list, but Takahashi tells him they may have another option. She reveals Iju was an information broker and an ether hacker, so he must have kept a backup of his familia, which she finds inside a hidden drawer. She connects it to the computer, and there is surprisingly no password, but all the files seem corrupted, but Veltol notes that the folders are arranged in a specific order to hide the real file. They manage to find a video where we see Iju revealing that the whole city relies on the ether reactor, which is running off the lives of innocent people. The reactor draws ether from the lines running through the ground, powered by the planet's core, that convert energy into magic and electricity. But to power the entire city, the reactor must sit on 10 ether lines, but it only has 2. So because of this shortage, generating power for the whole city is impossible, so it's why the Immortal Furnace project was started. The furnace burns immortals, converting them into ether for the city, with a single immortal's soul able to produce more ether than 1,000 mortals. According to Iju's sources, they hired the homeless and outsiders to build the project, and they were all killed once the furnace was complete. He mentions how the people at Ishimaru call these immortals firewood, and the first immortal that was fed to the furnace was the Dark Pirzenal. The immortal hunts were just an excuse to gather immortals, but he believes the company is running low on firewood, which is why they were buying a list of immortals from the Yakuza Guild. He mentions that once they run out of usable firewood, the entire city will be affected, but he can't allow them to continue. He notes that he's saved all the data there, leaving it up to whoever watches the video to decide what to do, adding that the only one who can resolve the problem would have been the legendary Demon Lord. Veltol wonders if they should leak the information, but Takahashi thinks it will just be taken down and she will be killed like Iju. Veltol thinks that as the king of the immortals, it's his responsibility, so she doesn't need to trouble herself with it. She notes that they should at least inform the officials about the body, and Veltol thinks he should also tell Machina about the situation, but he isn't able to reach her, so he worries that something has happened to her. We see Machina in the apartment as she thinks about what to make for dinner, but she suddenly gets a visit from Marcus, and there's a huge explosion. He calls her cold for attacking him on sight, and we see Machina in her combat form. They fire their blades at each other, but Machina charges through the smoke, and she blows off his arm, but he instantly regenerates it, and he summons even more swords. Machina protects herself with a barrier, so Marcus tries to blow her up, but we see that she's okay. Kinohara tries to attack her, but she manages to get away. She decides to take Kinohara out, but Marcus cancels her spell, and Kinohara stabs her from behind. She tells Marcus he should have disabled Machina's Familia from the beginning, but he notes he couldn't help having some fun. He gets bricked seeing her on the ground, and Machina wonders what he did to her, so he reveals he shut down her Familia. She thinks it should be impossible to hack since her Familia was standalone, but he reveals that all Familia have a back door, and using his new advanced Familia, he can shut any of them down, so there's no one who can defeat him. After that, we see Veltol as he gets back to the apartment, wondering what happened to Machina. They realize there was an explosion, and Takahashi hacks into the delivery drones around the area, so they find out Marcus was the one behind it. They see him taking Machina away, and Takahashi realizes she's being taken to the furnace. Veltol prepares to save her, but Takahashi tells him he can't just charge in, because the reactor area will be protected by lots of Magino mechs. She notes that she can't do much in a fight, but Veltol realizes there's someone who can help them. He ends up finding Graham, and he kneels to him to ask for his help. He explains how immortals are being burnt to power the city, asking Graham to help save Machina. Graham notes that if he destroys the reactor, it could also mean the end of the city, so he asks Veltol if he plans on killing everyone just to save one person. But Veltol decides he will save both Machina and the city since he's the Demon Lord, and he's the one who will rule over everything. He asks Graham to help him once more, so Graham agrees, but mentions he's only doing it to save a woman that's been kidnapped, because it's his job as the hero to protect the weak. Takahashi guides them to an underground area that can lead them to the reactor, but Veltol thinks they don't have the time to clear a dungeon, but Graham uses an original skill he created to easily map out the dungeon, and Veltol tells him he has no pride as an adventurer, mentioning how much effort he would put into making his dungeons in the past, so they start to argue, but Takahashi tells them to focus, reminding them that Machina's life is on the line. Graham detects no traps, so he thinks they can take the shortest path to the reactor. Veltol asks Takahashi if she's ready, but she notes that it's taking longer than expected, so they might need to buy her more time. They approach the furnace on an elevator, but they lose their signal to Takahashi as they get closer to the reactor. Graham notes that Veltol has gotten stronger, so he thinks Graham is being sarcastic, mentioning how much weaker he is. But Graham tells him his past self would have never been strong enough to have bowed to him for the sake of one of his vassals. They arrive at the reactor, and Kinohara is surprised they actually showed up. We return to Machina, as Marcus tells her they're directly below the ether reactor, and he shows her the immortal furnace, telling her it provides power for the city by converting immortal souls into ether. He reveals that he used her friends as firewood, so she becomes angry, and she blasts him with her flames, but his barrier protects him. He explains that immortals can't physically die, but they will meet their end if they're thrown into the furnace, because their souls will be destroyed. He mentions that Zell was the first one they used as firewood, saying he must have suffered during his final moments, so Machina thinks about avenging him. But Marcus tells her to calm down, saying he's grateful to the immortals, because their sacrifice paved the way for the city's prosperity. He reveals that only a few members of the Ishimara group know about the furnace, and they've been keeping it a secret, because the public will oppose them if they learn the truth. He tells her they're running out of firewood, so he plans to burn her soul, knowing she will give them enough energy until they find another source, since she's one of the 6 dark peers. Meanwhile, Kinohara mentions that she won't let Veltol pass, but she's surprised to see Graham, because she never thought the hero and the demon lord would work together. Graham knows that he's past his prime, but he decides to take her on, and Veltol warns him to be careful, mentioning her skill with a sword. But he thinks it shouldn't be a problem, reminding him that he used to be the strongest swordsman in Alniath. Kinohara suddenly appears behind Graham, and she attacks him with her lightning slash. But he manages to block her attack, and Veltol runs to the furnace, so she tries to stop him, but Graham gets in her way. Veltol tells him not to die, and he jumps down the pit, as Kinohara tells Graham that his era ended a long time ago, but he explains that he will continue to fight as long as someone needs his help. She wants to end the fight quickly, so she activates her Magino gear, as a flash of light blinds him, and she suddenly blows him away. She explains that she's using a prototype of the 5th generation, telling him it's superior to the other Magino gears, but she mentions that it has a defect, saying the operating time depends on the driver's mana pool. She continues to attack him, as she calls him a relic of the past, saying he will lose because everything about him is outdated, but he explains that it won't decide the outcome of their fight. She uses her lightning sword again, so he blocks her attack, but she quickly sheathes her sword, before delivering another attack, but he still manages to react on time. He admits that he can't find an opening, saying her Magino gear is impressive, but he kicks her away, as he notes that it's also durable. But he mentions that her attacks aren't fast enough, because she still has to sheath her sword before using her magic. She's impressed that he was able to notice it, but she thinks it doesn't matter, because he won't be able to defeat her, telling him he's no match for her Magino gear. But she struggles to hit him, and he sees an opening, so he uses his magic, which summons earth spikes to surround her. But she manages to break free, so he uses his Frost Nova to immobilize her, and he lunges at her, but she blocks his attack. So he follows up with a fireball, landing a direct hit, and there's a massive explosion. But she gets back up, as he realizes that his spell isn't strong enough, but he notes that his tactics are still effective, revealing that he learned the combo 500 years ago. So she becomes upset, and she charges in, but he kicks her away, as she wonders why she can't defeat him, so he tells her he won't lose so easily, since he's the hero. She charges up for her next attack, telling him he can't win with his rusted sword, but he tells her it will continue to shine as long as the people need his help. He calls upon the power of his sword, and it starts shining, as he tells her he's about to use his ultimate attack. She rushes forward, but his sword suddenly bursts with energy, and he delivers his ultimate attack, which covers the entire area with his light. But he can't believe she's still alive, so he admits that her Magino gear is impressive. She wonders how he was able to defeat her, so he explains that it's because of his experience, telling her he's been fighting for 500 years. She asks him why he isn't following Veltol, thinking he doesn't stand a chance against Marcus, but Graham tells her not to underestimate him, because he won't charge in without a plan. She thinks Graham is lying, but he mentions that Veltol has a trump card, telling her he's the only one who knows about it, and he thinks Veltol will win the moment he uses it. Kinohara tells him to put her out of her misery, but he refuses, telling her she's in no condition to continue their fight, so killing her would be pointless. But he realizes that they're under attack, so he protects her with his barrier, and a group of mechas appear, so he prepares to take them on. We see Machina as Marcus is about to sacrifice her, and he tells her about his goal to become the next demon lord after he kills the immortals. He bids her farewell, and he lets her go, causing her to fall down the furnace as she thinks about the moments she spent with Veltol. She wishes him all the best, and she mentions that she loves him, but just as she's about to hit the bottom, he suddenly arrives to save her. He tells her not to give up so easily, and he apologizes for being late. He asks Marcus if he has any justification for his actions, but he explains that he doesn't, and Veltol gives him a chance to serve him again. But he refuses, so Veltol decides to kill him. Marcus attacks with his blood swords, which Veltol easily defends against, but they suddenly explode, covering the area with smoke. Marcus uses one of his blood swords as Veltol charges in, and they start to fight, as Marcus realizes that Veltol is using strengthening magic. He mentions that it's the right move, because he can't cancel magic that has already been activated, but he fights Veltol head-on, and he manages to overpower him. Veltol decides to punish him for the immortals he betrayed, but Marcus thinks he doesn't stand a chance, and he starts attacking him with incredible speed. But Veltol manages to cut his arms, and he destroys his head, but Marcus launches his blood at him, and he instantly regenerates. He knows that Veltol was aiming for his familia, telling him he can't win because he doesn't have one, and Marcus detonates the blood on Veltol's body. We see that he's in terrible condition, and Marcus mentions that the fight is over as he uses his strongest explosion to finish him off. He tells Veltol he's disappointed because he was expecting him to put up a fight, and he prepares to deal with Machina, but she wonders what's happening to Veltol. Marcus sees him surrounded by a dark energy, and he compliments Marcus for defeating him in his current form, saying he's the second person who has driven him to this point. Veltol decides to give him one last chance, asking him if he will serve him again, but he refuses, saying he will rule the world after he kills the other immortals. So Veltol decides to kill him, and he's about to transform, so Marcus tries to use his blood sword, but his spell doesn't work. Veltol starts laughing as he tells Marcus to feel honored, because only Graham has seen him in his second form, and his body starts to transform as he tells Marcus to prepare to meet his end. We cut to Takahashi as she mentions that the show is about to begin, and she presses a button which allows her to control all the screens in the city, and she shows everyone Veltol's stream. Everyone starts watching, recognizing him as a popular streamer, and Takahashi recalls that he ordered her to boost his faith power by making him more popular. She tells him it's a difficult task, but he mentions that she can do anything she wants to achieve the goal, so she decides to have some fun with it. She mentions that she's tired, but she's glad that she was able to help her friend, and she hopes Veltol can save Machina. Everyone watches his stream, and they realize he's all over the news because he has taken control of all the screens in the city. We return to Veltol as he transforms into a massive beast, so Marcus freaks out as Veltol explains that he can only use the form with high levels of faith and ether. Marcus thinks he still doesn't stand a chance, telling him things have changed since he lost to Graham, and he tries to use his blood sword again, but it doesn't work, so he wonders what's happening. Veltol reveals that he cancelled his magic, so Marcus realizes he can cast spells without incantations, but he thinks it's impossible, because even the latest tech hasn't reached that level yet. Veltol explains that with his current form, he can copy the abilities of the Familia and use it as his own. He thanks Marcus for helping him reach a new level of power, telling him he can now cast magic without incantations because of his tech. But he thinks Veltol is lying, and he tries to use his magic. But it still doesn't work, so he starts losing it, and his mouth suddenly explodes, as Veltol decides he has heard enough. He cuts him into pieces, but his body regenerates, so Veltol proceeds to torture him. He sees strange creatures reaching out to him, as Veltol explains that he has infiltrated his Familia, and he's now feeding false images into his brain. Marcus freaks out, and he begs Veltol to stop, saying he will serve him once again, but Veltol reminds him that he has already refused his offer twice. He stabs Marcus, who realizes he's about to fall into the furnace, and Veltol tells him he's about to become firewood. He tells Veltol they aren't so different, because he's also willing to feed his fellow immortals to the furnace, but he reminds Marcus that he's notoriously evil, since he's the demon lord. Marcus tells him he doesn't know anything about the new world, and he throws his blood at Veltol before using his strongest explosion. But it doesn't work, and Veltol bids him farewell as he throws him down the furnace. His body melts away, and Machina's restraints disappear as Veltol returns to his original form, and he asks her if she was scared by his appearance. So she admits that she was afraid, but she thinks it was the perfect form for him as the Demon Lord. He admits that he was weak, but because of his weakness, he was able to find the light of immortality in her, telling her it's the reason why he was able to defeat Marcus. He hugs her, telling her he loves her, and she tells him she feels the same. After that, we see Veltol playing an incredibly difficult video game, and he struggles to defeat the final boss, but he manages to deliver the finishing blow. So he celebrates, telling his viewers they were wrong about him, because they thought he didn't have what it took to clear the game. He mentions that he's been playing for 72 hours straight, and he thanks his viewers for sticking with him, before ending his stream. Machina joins him, telling him she's impressed because he was able to clear the game, but she tells him to take a break every 24 hours, since she wants to spend time with him. He mentions that he now has over 3 million subscribers, so she congratulates him, asking him if he wants to celebrate. But he tells her there's no need, because he has already unlocked his second form, but he mentions that it isn't useful, because it only specializes in dealing with immortals. He wants to look for the other Dark Peers, since 3 of them are still missing. He notes that Marcus never mentioned anything about them, and Veltol knows that he likes to boast about the immortals he killed, so he thinks they're still alive. He considers checking the Dark Peer records, because it automatically tracks their locations, but Machina tells him it was lost after he was defeated, so he tells her they should look for it. The doorbell suddenly rings, as Takahashi tells them to open up, so they let her in, and Veltol is surprised to learn that she's still in high school. He thinks she's too young to take on dangerous jobs, but she doesn't care, telling him she watched his stream. He thinks the viewers got bored, since it was 72 hours, but she tells him not to worry, telling him he can upload highlights in the future so that everyone can catch up. She asks them what they're planning to do next, so he reveals that they will look for the Dark Peer records, and she becomes excited, thinking they're going on a treasure hunt. So she decides to join them, telling them she will gather intel for them. She opens her browser, and Machina thinks she won't find information about it online, but she explains that she will look for the possible spots where they can find it, and she uses the artificial spirits in her familia to narrow down the results. She mentions that she was able to find it, and she shows them Akihabara City, telling them it has a magic academy called Luzel, which was founded after the end of the Immortal War. She mentions that there's a hidden treasury beneath it, which hasn't been opened in 500 years, and Veltol thinks they can find the Dark Peer records inside it. So she offers to handle the academy's security while they sneak in, but Machina tells her it's illegal. Veltol suggests that they should enter the academy as students, and Takahashi supports his idea, saying she will alter their documents so that they will be accepted into the academy. They travel to Akihabara City, and a robot welcomes them at the train station, but it asks for Veltol's ID, telling him he can't enter the city without it. So he becomes upset, and he thinks about destroying the robot, but Takahashi allows it to scan his ID, and it allows him to pass. He realizes that the city is beautiful, saying it reminds him of Alniath, and he looks around with the others. He sees magical prosthetics for sale, realizing everyone's interested in Magino gadgets, and Machina reveals that the people are replacing their body parts with machines. They reach Luzel, and they meet the principal named Gotel, who examines their documents, but Takahashi becomes nervous because she's afraid that Gotel might see through her forgery. We learn that she looked into Gotel, realizing she's the head of her clan, which is one of the 3 great houses in Akihabara, and she even controls half of the city. Takahashi is afraid that she will reject their documents, but she accepts it, and she asks them why they picked Luzel. Takahashi tries to come up with an excuse, but Veltol tells her the truth, saying he wants to see what's inside the hidden treasury. Takahashi thinks they're doomed, but Gotel is impressed by his enthusiasm, and she allows him to enter the treasury. But she mentions that nobody can access it, because it's been sealed for 500 years. She explains that the only way to release the seal is to have the heads of the 3 great houses gather with their regalia, which act as keys to the treasury. She shows Veltol her sword, telling him it's one of the keys, and she promises to release the seal if he gathers the other regalia. She mentions that she also wants to see what's inside the treasury, but she explains there's a problem, because one of the regalia is missing. After that, Veltol and his friends meet their teacher named Mag, who tells Takahashi to remove her familia, because she isn't allowed to wear it inside the academy. Mag explains that the academy wants its students to focus on learning magic so that they can become excellent sorcerers, and she leads Veltol and his friends to the classroom, telling them to introduce themselves when she calls their name. We see a strange girl in the classroom as she hears a voice in her head, and her classmates talk about her, thinking she's a loser. She mentions that she's bored with her life, so she wants to leave her school, but Veltol joins their class, introducing himself as an exchange student, and he mentions that everyone should be honored to have him in their class. Makina also introduces herself, saying she's good at making curry, and Takahashi greets everyone, telling them she's a genius hacker. Mag shows them a mana crystal, saying it will measure their magic powers, and she tells Veltol to place his hand over it. He warns her that it's going to break, but she thinks it's impossible, so he follows her instructions, and the crystal instantly shatters. Mag gives everyone an introduction, as she mentions that spirit channeling is considered taboo, but she explains that they need to learn it in magic school. She gets distracted by Veltol, since he isn't taking notes, so she tells him to pay attention, but he tells her not to worry, because he has already memorized everything. She asks him a question about history, so he gives her a detailed explanation about what happened hundreds of years ago, and everyone's impressed by his answer. After that, we see the strange girl named Hazuki having lunch, and she hears everyone talking about Veltol. But a boy named Albert approaches her, calling her the head of the Reynard clan, which has fallen into ruin. He mocks her for having no talent for magic, telling her she doesn't deserve to be in the school, and he mentions that she's receiving special treatment because she's part of the 3 great houses. He starts insulting her parents, so she becomes upset, but he tells her not to get angry because he's just saying the truth. But Veltol tells him to shut up because he's enjoying his bowl of udon, saying it's supposed to be eaten in silence, and he mentions that his food has been ruined because of Albert's hypocrisy. He insults Veltol for live streaming, telling him it's a fake job, but he thanks Albert for watching his streams. He tells Veltol to watch his tongue because he's talking to the heir of the Hagrams family, but he recognizes Albert's family name, asking him if he's the descendant of Gonfall. He mentions that Gonfall is their founder, but Veltol calls him a coward because he ran away during an important battle. So Albert becomes upset, but Veltol tells him he has no right to look down on Hazuki because she has more talent than him. He thinks it's impossible because she has no talent whatsoever, and he challenges Veltol to a duel, saying he will teach him a lesson. After that, we see Hazuki in the arena when Takahashi approaches her, asking her why everyone's avoiding her. So she explains that they hate her because they think she doesn't deserve to be in the school. She reveals that her grades in theory are excellent, but she can't use magic, so everyone thinks she's a failure. Makina can't believe the students are allowed to have duels in the school, so Hazuki explains that the academy encourages it because it wants to train mages who can fight. Mag serves as the referee, and she tells Veltol and Albert to end their fight quickly because their lunch break is almost over. Veltol tells Hazuki to watch their fight because she's about to witness his victory. But Albert tells him he's being arrogant, revealing that his magic is unrivaled in the academy because he's the only student who has an A+ in all subjects about mana. Veltol still thinks Hazuki has more talent than him, but she thinks it's impossible because she received an F rating in all the practical tests. But Makina thinks the school's evaluation is flawed, saying Veltol is never wrong. He mentions that Albert is no match for him, so he decides to add a handicap, saying he will win the match without moving from his spot. He promises to do anything for Albert if he loses the duel, but if he wins, he tells Albert to stop bullying Hazuki. He accepts the conditions, thinking he will win the fight, and Hazuki tells Makina to stop Veltol because she thinks he doesn't stand a chance, but Makina tells her he will destroy Albert. Mag begins the duel, and Albert is about to use his spell, but Veltol knows that he's holding back, and tells him to use his full power. So he uses all of his mana to cast his spell, and Mag tries to stop the fight, thinking he might kill Veltol, but he tells her not to interfere, saying he will teach him a lesson. Albert starts chanting, and Veltol tells him to bring it on, but Hazuki shouts at him to move if he doesn't want to die. Albert fires a magic arrow, but Veltol easily catches it, and he crushes it with his bare hands. Albert can't believe it, but Veltol tells him he has incredible talent, telling him he will become a powerful sorcerer if he trains for another 200 years. Veltol knows that he worked hard to improve his magic, and he apologizes for being rude to his ancestor, and he decides to reward him for his efforts. Veltol gathers his mana, and he creates a tiny ball, which he fires at Albert, and it completely blows him away. Hazuki wonders what just happened, so Machina explains that Veltol fired a mass of compressed mana, but she's upset because it was wasted on Mortal. Hazuki knows that a high schooler shouldn't be able to do it, so she wonders if he's even human, and Mag announces that he has won the match. After that, Veltol talks to Hazuki, who thanks him for helping her, but she tells him to stay away from her, because she will cause trouble for him. Veltol and his friends walk around the city, as Takahashi mentions that Albert is nothing like the other people she met. Machina thinks it's because the culture of Alniath remains strong in Akihabara, and Takahashi tells her she doesn't like it, saying she's glad she was born in this era. Machina tells her she can go home, but she reveals that she wants to see what's inside the treasury, asking Veltol if he can open it with his magic. So he reveals that he can, but he explains that the contents will be destroyed if he forces it open, so they need to gather the regalia. She mentions that she looked into them, so she knows that one of them is held by the representative of Electric Town, but she thinks they'll never find the one that's missing. But Veltol tells her that Hazuki is the head of the Reynard clan, which has probably fallen into ruin because they lost their regalia, so he thinks she can help them find it. They reach the Electric Town, and they realize it's nothing like the other half of the city. Takahashi mentions that they could get lost, so they need a guide, telling them she already knows everything about the town, and she reveals that she knows a place where they can gather information. She takes them to a maid cafe, where they see girls talking to their guests, but Veltol wonders how they can gather information there. So she explains that all kinds of people visit the cafe, and she mentions that the maids love to gossip, so they can use them to gather information. Machina mentions that the place has a unique atmosphere, but she wonders why the items are so expensive. So Takahashi tells her it's because of the maids, saying the customers are paying extra because they want to fulfill their dreams of having a cute girl serve them. But Veltol and Machina don't get it because they're used to having butlers and maids. Takahashi mentions that her friend got banned for harassing a maid, so he tells them to be careful, and Veltol recalls how Hazuki told him to stay away from her. Takahashi thinks they need to be patient with her, since she might avoid them if they force her to talk to them, and Machina mentions that she seems like a good girl, saying she wants to get along with her. Takahashi decides to call a maid, and she realizes there's a request system, so she asks for the one with the biggest assets. A maid approaches them, and she prepares to take their order, but they realize that it's Hazuki. They tell her she looks good in her uniform, and Veltol reminds her that they're her master. So she asks them what they want to order, and he tells her to copy the maid named Manon, who dances as she serves her customers. She thinks it looks ridiculous, but Machina tells her she doesn't have to do it if she doesn't have what it takes, so she thinks Machina is looking down on her, and she decides to do it. She gives them their orders, and she dances as she tells them to enjoy their meal. They think she's amazing, and after they eat, they tell her she can drop her act, because they're the only ones left in the cafe. Veltol mentions that he needs her regalia, because he wants to open the treasury, but she explains that she can't help them, saying her family fell into ruin after she lost it. Takahashi wonders what the regalia is, so Hazuki reveals that it's a symbol of sovereignty, and she mentions that 500 years ago, the goddess Meldia gave Graham the regalia, but he ended up being exiled. Before he left, he gave the regalia to a man, who became the second king of Luzel, and the ancestor of the three great houses. But he gave the regalia to his 3 sons, and they split into 3 factions, because they fought each other for wealth and power. Hazuki explains that it's the reason why there are 3 great houses in Akihabara, and she mentions that their relationship has improved over time, but there are still people who hold grudges. She thinks there's nothing they can do, because she lost her regalia, but Veltol asks her to help them contact the head of Siebold, and she agrees to help. Takahashi hugs her, but she hears her stomach growling, so she realizes she's hungry. So they take her to a restaurant, where she enjoys her food, but everyone wonders what they're doing there, because they're students of Magic Town. Takahashi is impressed that she was able to arrange a meeting with the head of Siebold, but she explains that she can only take one of them with her, and Veltol decides to be the one to go. Hazuki starts eating dragon meat, but Veltol decides not to have any, because a dragon once served as his vassal. She asks him if he's scared, so he decides to try it with Machina, and he realizes it's delicious. After their meal, the cops approach them, telling them they shouldn't be there, because they're students of Magic Town. But Gotel suddenly appears, and she tells the cops to leave them alone because they're just enjoying their meals. So the cops decide to leave, and she mentions that Electric Town has a beef with them, saying she needs to talk to Hazuki. Veltol and his friends decide to look around, as Hazuki wonders why Gotel wants to talk to her. So she reveals that she wants to adopt her, because she wants her to live a happy life, but Hazuki is against it, saying she needs to protect the Reynard clan. Gotel understands her situation, but she mentions that she will always be on her side, telling her to get along with Veltol and the others. As she walks away, Hazuki suddenly hears the voice in her head, and Takahashi asks her if she's okay, because she looks pale, but she mentions that she's fine, telling Takahashi not to worry about her. After that, Hazuki and Veltol meet a man named Merrill, who introduces himself as the assistant of the head of Siebold. He uses his glasses to scan their bodies, and he takes them to his master named Cornea, who mentions that he always has time for Hazuki. Veltol formally introduces himself, saying he wasn't expecting Cornea to be a goblin, so Hazuki apologizes for his rudeness. But Cornea mentions that it's okay, because he doesn't care about lineage, saying he used to be a merchant, but the former head of Siebold took a liking to him and made him his successor. He asks them why they decided to visit him, so Veltol explains that he wants to talk about the regalia, and Cornea brings out his crown, saying it's House Siebold's regalia. He reveals that it contains fragments of Meldia's soul, and he mentions that he can't get rid of it unless he forfeits his ownership or loses his soul. Veltol realizes that he can steal it by killing him, so everyone sees him as a threat, but he says it was just a joke, asking Cornea if he can borrow it, because he wants to see what's inside the treasury. He reveals that he wants to rule the world, and Cornea thinks he's insane, but he decides to trust him because Hazuki brought him there. He mentions that he wants to change Akihabara because they're sticking to outdated traditions, but he tells Veltol that he will need all three regalia to open the treasury and become the true king of the city, so he realizes that he needs to summon Meldia to achieve his goal. Cornea notes that collecting the regalia is the quickest way, and he tells the others to leave, saying he wants to speak to Veltol alone. He agrees to help Veltol collect the regalia, and he tells him a secret he has been hiding from Hazuki, saying he can sense that the lost regalia is nearby. He tells Veltol to help her, because he knows that she's vulnerable, and he mentions that she's one of the reasons why he wants to change the city, since he owes her father a huge debt. He reveals that according to the records, she received the orb regalia from the previous head when she was young, so he thinks she's the only one who can find it. We see Machina in the bookstore, where she sees a book she made about Veltol, but she wonders how it got there, and she buys it because she doesn't want anyone else to see it. Takahashi joins her, and they eat together, as Machina asks her if she's okay with the exchange program. So she tells Machina she's fine, because she has enough credits, but she wonders why Machina is acting like her big sister. So she explains that she's older, and Takahashi thinks she's older than everyone, but she reveals that she's one of the youngest members of the Dark Peers. She mentions that there's only one member younger than her, and she treated her as her younger sister. But Takahashi suddenly sees Gotel, and she tries to call her, but Gotel completely ignores her. After that, Veltol tells everyone that Cornea is now their ally, saying they were able to get useful information thanks to Hazuki. Everyone realizes it's getting late, and they decide to go to her place, but she's surprised hearing this, wondering why they want to visit her house. So they tell her they want to get to know her better, and they decide to have a sleepover. In a flashback, we learn that Hazuki has been having memory lapses, and she ended up hurting the people close to her, so everyone disliked her. A doctor told her that House Reynard has a natural affinity for hosting spirits, but he thinks her memory lapses are caused by something else, because he can't find signs of mediumship being cast on her. While she's celebrating her birthday with her parents, she suddenly hears the voice in her head, and her parents pass away, leaving her as the head of House Reynard. We return to the present, as everyone arrives at Hazuki's house, and she turns over her picture with her parents. They drink together, as Takahashi wonders if the school knows about Hazuki's job, but she explains that she's keeping it a secret. Takahashi suggests a fighting game tournament, and Veltol thinks it's a great idea. But Hazuki isn't interested, so he asks her if she's afraid to fight him, and she decides to take him on. She easily defeats him, calling him a noob, but she suddenly has a memory lapse, and she realizes that she has completely destroyed him. After some time, Takahashi and Makina fall asleep, and Hazuki is about to take a bath, but she realizes that Veltol is in the bathroom. She tells him to call her when he's done, but he asks her if she's afraid of him because he has the perfect physique, saying her body is no match for his muscles. So she tells him to stop looking down on her, and she joins him in the pool. She asks him why he's involving himself with her, so he explains that he just followed his heart, but he mentions that things are different now because they have become friends. He thinks she's amazing because she's working hard to make ends meet, and she's also good at video games. He asks her if she had fun with them, so she reveals that she's happy to have them around, but he asks her about the photo frame she knocked down, wondering if she's hiding something about her parents. So she decides to tell him everything, and in another flashback, we see Hazuki waking up in her room. She asks her servants about the date, so they tell her it's her birthday, and she leaves with her parents, but we learn that her family has been receiving death threats. They go shopping together, but they hear people talking about them, saying they're all traitors. As they make their way home, she suddenly has a memory lapse, and an assassin attacks them, stabbing her parents to death. The doctor reveals that her mother was able to carry her to the hospital, so she was able to survive, but her parents didn't make it. During their funeral, Gotel and Cornea talk about the orb, knowing Hazuki inherited it, and they think she's too young to protect herself, so they decide to watch over her. Back in the present, Hazuki reveals that she's staying in Akihabara because her parents wanted to live there as nobles. But she lost everyone close to her, so she's doing her best to stay away from people, thinking she'll never be happy. But he thanks her for sharing her story, and he promises to forgive her no matter what happens. After they take a bath, Veltol senses a presence, and an assassin appears. Veltol asks him who he is, so he reveals that he's called Faceless, and he explains that he's there to make a deal. He mentions that his organization sees Veltol as a threat because he was able to defeat Marcus, so they want him to leave the city, saying they will open the treasury for him if he cooperates. But Veltol refuses, telling Faceless to know his place, so he realizes that negotiations have failed, but he tells Veltol that Akihabara is about to change, and he disappears. Meanwhile, we see Gotel as she visits Cornea, who tells his bodyguards to leave, and he asks her what she needs. But she suddenly cuts his head off, telling him she's there to take the crown. Everyone watches the news, realizing Mag was killed in an explosion, and the reporter mentions that Cornea was murdered by Gotel, so everyone expects the tension between Magic Town and Electric Town to escalate. Hazuki can't believe it, so she visits Gotel, asking her about the news, and Gotel tells her to calm down, but Hazuki realizes that she isn't acting like her usual self, asking her who she is. The students at the academy are ordered to gather in the practice hall, but they see a strange girl, who attacks them, using her spell to control their bodies. She warns everyone not to move, saying she will kill them if they try to resist. We return to Hazuki, as she realizes that Mag is controlling Gotel's body. She reveals that her mission is to collect all 3 regalia, and she mentions that she had a hard time dealing with Cornea, because he was always with his bodyguards. So she decided to steal Gotel's body, because he lets his guard down whenever he's with her. Mag reveals that she lured Gotel to a cybernetic surgery clinic, where she installed her unit into Gotel's body, saying Gotel must have died during the explosion. She tells Hazuki to help her finish her quest, but she refuses to join her, so Mag shows her the students in the academy, threatening to kill them if she doesn't cooperate. Mag restrains her on top of the academy, and she mentions that the orb and Meldia are already there. She explains that Meldia was able to stay in the world because she transferred her soul into Hazuki, and Mag reveals that she was able to find out because when she attacked Hazuki 10 years ago, Meldia took control of her body, so she realizes that the voice she's been hearing belongs to Meldia. Mag explains that after her parents died, Meldia no longer took control of her body, revealing Hazuki's low mana pool is because all of her mana is being used to control Meldia. Mag adds that the orb's function is to seal her, and she knows that after she attacked Hazuki, she underwent surgery to replace her right eye. But Mag knows that Hazuki's eye isn't a prosthetic, because her mother told the doctor to use the orb to replace her right eye. We return to Veltol, as he tells Albert to destroy the light on top of the students' heads, telling him it will undo the spell. Takahashi turns off the lights, and they make their move, setting the students free. The girl tries to stop them, but Makina charges at her and easily defeats her. Takahashi mentions that Hazuki is on the roof, so Veltol leaves to save her, and we see her struggling as Mag reveals that she was the one who killed everyone close to her. Veltol arrives, and Mag tells him he's ruining her plan, but she tells him he can't win, and she suddenly disappears. He calls out to Hazuki, but a beam of light pierces through the sky, and he realizes that Meldia has taken over her body. We see Graham watching the citizens of Akihabara as they start arguing with each other, and Kinohara wonders if he plans to save everyone, but they suddenly see Meldia's light as it covers the entire city. We return to Veltol as he asks Meldia if she has no pride as a god because she stole Hazuki's body. So she becomes upset, telling him to know his place, and she sends him crashing to the ground. But he immediately recovers, saying his regeneration has improved, thanks to his 3 million subscribers. She attacks him once again, so he tries to counter with his spell, but a rock hits his hand, causing him to miss, and she slices off his arm. He quickly jumps away, but he realizes that his arm isn't regenerating because her sword can disable immortality. But he reveals that he has already discovered her powers, saying she can control fate, which explains why luck is on her side. He knows that she used her powers to stop Graham from aging, but she suddenly feels guilty because she wanted to make him happy, but she ended up making his life miserable. Hazuki regains control, and she asks Veltol to help her, so he tells her to hang on, but Meldia mentions that he's no match for her. We see Machina fighting against the mysterious girl as she tries to cast a spell, but the girl pushes her back. She wonders if they have met before, but the girl doesn't recognize her, introducing herself as Ange. She rushes forward, so Machina jumps away and counters with her spell, but she realizes that Ange used her wings to protect herself. She launches a number of homing blasts, and Machina realizes that she can't dodge them, so she protects herself with a barrier, but Ange charges with her spear and stabs her through the chest. She thinks the fight is over, but Machina suddenly detonates her blood, which causes Ange's head to explode. But she gets back up, and Machina realizes she's an immortal. Ange's face is revealed, and Machina realizes she's Mei, the youngest member of the Dark Peers. Machina wonders if her memories have been erased, but she suddenly loses control, and a dark orb appears above her, absorbing everything in the area. She prepares to attack Machina, but Mag suddenly arrives and puts her to sleep, telling Machina she was surprised to see her cornered. Machina tells Mag to give her back, but she reveals that her superiors are interested in Mei, calling her a prototype, and she teleports away with her. We return to Veltol as he struggles against Meldia because he can't hit her with his magic. But he mentions that he finally understands the true nature of her powers, saying she can only nullify his physical attacks. But she needs to dodge his magic because she knows that it can harm her, so he thinks he can defeat her, but she tells him he doesn't stand a chance. He asks her about her goal, so she reveals that she wants to know how Graham feels, saying she needs to apologize for making his life miserable. So Veltol realizes that she's in love with him, and he mentions that Graham will hate her because she stole Hazuki's body. So she becomes emotional, and she lunges at him, but he casts a spell to enchant his sword, surrounding it with light, and he takes a stance, which reminds her of Graham. But she suddenly loses control as Mag realizes that her spell has been activated, and she decides to leave because she knows that Meldia is about to destroy everything. She transforms into her second form, and she fires a ball of light, which sends Veltol flying. But Graham saves him, asking him about Meldia, so he explains that she's going on a rampage because of her crush. Graham thinks about taking her out, but Veltol mentions that he wants to save Hazuki, telling Graham he needs his help. Meldia launches a barrage of light at them, so Veltol and Graham unleash their full power, and they rush forward, as Graham protects Veltol, allowing him to get closer. She attacks him with a powerful energy beam, but Graham slices it in half, and he throws Veltol ahead. Meldia prepares to attack him, but she sees Graham, which distracts her, and Veltol manages to stab her. She returns to normal, and she sees his sword, realizing she's about to disappear because it has the power to cut through souls. He tells her she should have had more faith in Graham, saying he could never hate her because he's the hero. So she starts crying, realizing he wasn't living a miserable life, and Veltol tells her to go to sleep as she thanks him for helping her realize how Graham feels. Hazuki realizes that Veltol saved her, and she starts crying, but Takahashi calls him, revealing that the city is in chaos, so he tells Hazuki they need to save everyone. We see the citizens of Electric Town as they blame the people of Magic Town for the incident. But Veltal suddenly arrives with Hazuki, who reveals that she has gathered all 3 regalia, so she's now the king of the city. But everyone finds her suspicious, thinking she's the one behind everything, so they don't accept her as their new ruler. She explains that Cornea and Gotel were murdered by Mag, who also tried to kill her, but Veltal saved her life, and they were able to recover the regalia. The people don't believe her, but Meryl uses his glasses to scan her, realizing she's telling the truth, so he tells them not to interrupt her. She declares that the regalia will no longer have royal authority in the city, saying they will no longer have a king, and the city council will govern in her place. The people think they can't be trusted, but she doesn't care, telling them to do whatever they want. After that, Veltal and his friends open the treasury, and they find the Dark Pier records. They take it home with them, and they realize that 2 other members of the Dark Piers are still alive. Hazuki ends up transferring to Takahashi's school, and Veltal tells her the uniform looks good on her. They decide to celebrate her transfer, and he challenges her to a rematch, but he still gets destroyed. He asks her how she's finding her new school, so she reveals that she's doing well, saying she's famous after her speech in Akihabara. Veltal also mentions how his channel gained more traction because of it, but he notes that not everyone's happy about it. Hazuki hears Meltia thanking him, so she helps her thank him for forgiving her, and he challenges her to another game. He decides to stream it for his fans, and everyone now recognizes him as the Demon Lord. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.